Hello, everyone. I just wanted to get some things off of my mind about where I'm at with life right now. For people who know me, they know that I am a lifelong member of the church. I am 41 years old, born and raised in the church. My family went through a period of inactivity due to something a bishop had said. And that actually is a point in my story that I feel is appropriate. There was a bishop who didn't like the relationships that my sisters were having at the time, and to my knowledge, nothing was inappropriate about that, but that bishop called my parents into the office and wanted them to be publicly shamed and get on their knees and pray for their daughters, who were horrible people. And that's what led us into inactivity. Fast forward, I'm 17 years old. I start dating, and I have a son the day before my birthday when I turned 18. And of course, it was out of wedlock. He was at my high school graduation and so on. It was at this point that I decided that I needed to go back to church for his sake. That, I needed to make sure there's some sort of moral compass and guiding around him, and that he wasn't just aimlessly living his life. And so I went back. I had to talk to my bishop, of course, because I had a child out of wedlock. But it wasn't a huge deal at the time because I had just turned 18. And I was able to receive the Aaronic priesthood. By the time I was 19, I was able to become an elder. By the time I was shortly after that, I'm not sure exactly, to be honest, the age, but maybe 20. I went to the temple, received my endowments. Long story short, I did get married to the woman who was the mother of my child, and that was a very short marriage. Divorce is not looked kindly upon in the church. So I was already ostracized for having been inactive for a certain part of my life, for having a child out of wedlock, for not serving a mission. And now we're at this point where I'm getting divorced. So very much a black sheep in the church. Never felt like this was a home for me. I got divorced, came into a new marriage, married a convert. My first wife was also a convert, so this is the second time that I dated somebody and they became a convert. During that process, I tried my best, but I actually had fallen into kind of the same trap and had sex before marriage. Now, at this point, since I had been to the temple, I was an elder, I had to go and talk to my bishop about this, and I got a letter basically saying that I was going to be part of a disciplinary council. At this council, the entire bishopric was there. It was, the bishop, his two counselors, and the clerk and the secretary, and everyone's in this room, and they want to know exactly details, dates, times, everything. At the end of it, because of the length of time that had happened from when the transgression took place and when I had talked to my bishop, I was not excommunicated, but I was disfellowshipped. So in that sense, I was not able to partake of the sacrament for a while. I was not able to hold callings. I was not able to say prayer in church. And, looking back now, I realize that the church really has it all wrong. And I hate saying the church too, because it's not the church and it's not for me anymore. It's the LDS church. They have it completely wrong, because a person needs to be praying more. They need to definitely be partaking of the sacrament They need to be active in a church when they have done things that they feel like they have not been close to the Spirit or close to Christ. So that's why I think my first part about this being wrong, and I remember the feelings I had in thinking that, like, I had to talk to a man and he was going to decide it for me, not God, but a man was going to decide my fate and my eternal progression. And I had to, not just him, but multiple people, talk to them, and it was really off-putting. Moved many years out. During that time, my then wife had fallen away from the church. I was doing my best to take the kids to church on my own, but I wasn't making it every week, and I had a lot on my plate. Eventually, that, after 7 years, ended in divorce. And finally, I found somebody on LDS Singles who is the love of my life. I've been married to her for 11 years. I couldn't ask for a greater wife. She is, if there ever could be a soulmate, she is mine. And we kind of felt like, because we'd both been divorced, she had 1 child and I had 4, that we had to do everything by the book, and we had to do it like a checklist to make sure to prove, basically, we already were tainted in the eyes of the people in the Mormon church, that we were bad people because we had been divorced, and so we were looked at as being less than to begin with. I have a good job, and I've had a good job the entire time we've been married, but my job doesn't pay like $250,000 to $300,000 a year, like some of the people in our area do. And so because of that, I've always been looked down upon and passed over for callings as well. Because in the Mormon church, they associate righteousness with your financial assets, how well you're doing, and because I'm not a CEO of a company, then I'm looked down upon as not being worthy and righteous and leading my family in the right direction. So, of course, I've never been an elders quorum president or a bishop or in a stake calling because of those things. And that's actually, I felt all this time, that's hindered my wife in those things as well, too. If I had been, then she would also have received those higher callings as well. Well, we're at the point where 3 years ago, around that time, the church came out with saints. And it was supposed to be something because of all the criticism that the church had faced about various different issues that, especially pertaining to church history, that they would just put some things out there and put it all to rest with these saints volume of books, so that people could see for themselves the history of the church. The problem is that there are some things that made you think a little bit. They were not crystal clear when you read Saints. They always tried to spin it back when they put something negative to be very positive. And so in the end, you didn't feel horrible about it. But as I kept reading the Saints, and there was little things that would come up, I would question and be like, well, that's weird. I've never heard this before in my life. So I would go and research it. And that's exactly what the LDS Church does not want you to do, is research things. They want to be total control of the information that you receive. So they want to make sure from start to finish that you are doing and saying and reading and believing everything that they tell you to. You do not get the option to have a free choice in this situation. So they discourage you from reading anything that's not directly from the church, because they say that's Satan and it's evil, and that's going to definitely have an effect on your testimony, because Satan is going to grasp you and pull you away. And the reality of it is that they don't want to share the information that you will discover. And without a doubt, if you do any type of research at all, as a member of the church, you will discover these things, and it will shake your testimony to the core. And so that's what I did slowly. And then, like, every few months, I would try to bring myself back on path and say, nope, this isn't right. Maybe I'm reading stuff. It's not from the right sources. There's got to be something wrong with it. It's all my fault. Not the church. The church is great. And try to go back and hit that checklist. Well, the problem is that after you do that, and then you read some more, and then you come back, and you keep doing that, eventually, you have a box that you just received from Amazon. You open it up, you take everything out, and you go to put that stuff back in the box, and it doesn't fit. So, at that point, you have no question but to leave the LDS church. And so the things that really have shaken me, and that the biggest thing is the church does not tell you these things. They hide them. So part of it up front, if the church would be like, this is our history and this is what happened, probably would make somewhat a difference in people leaving the church. But they hide everything. They're very, very secretive about everything in the church, and they don't want you to know the history at all. Because once you do, you will not be a believing member of the church. So, we look at things like the Book of Mormon itself. The Book of Mormon itself is actually a plagiarized book from two other books. One is Hebrews, a view of Israelites in America, and the other one is Found Manuscript. Those two together compromise almost word for word the exact wording, names, places in those books as is in the Book of Mormon. In fact, one of them was written by a pastor who happened to be Oliver Cowdery's pastor before the LDS church formed. And that pastor who wrote that book had mentioned in the book about Israelites coming to America and about Native Americans being descendants from them. He named almost every name in the Book of Mormon that is a chapter, a book in the Book of Mormon, like Nephi and Jacob and Lehi and Mormon. All those things were in this other book already. So right off the bat, the names, the idea of the book, word for word, certain chapters were taken directly from these books. And the problem was that in the area where Joseph Smith lived at the time, there were people who knew this pastor, they knew these books, and they knew that Joseph Smith had plagiarized them. And so when he would come and preach to them, and same with Oliver Cowdery, these people knew, wait, we've heard this story before. And they could recite what was going to happen in these. And so that right there, right off the bat, is a lie from Joseph Smith. Some of the other things that were lies about Joseph Smith happen to be the fact that, or I guess not lies, but deceitful practices or things that were hidden from people, was that Joseph Smith's family were treasure seekers. That came out with Saints. Up until that point, a lot of people didn't really know much about that. But they were. And Joseph actually was helped digging a well and was searching for treasure and using stones that he called seer stones to help him find things. And he would tell people that when they were digging, like, oh, the treasure just moved because you did something and now you can't reach it. Oh, darn, but you got to pay me because I helped you come out here and look for these treasures using these seer stones, these magical rocks that would help you find treasure. So one of the lies that goes along with that is that we believed that the Urim and Thummim were used to translate the Book of Mormon, and that Joseph is sitting there looking at the gold plates and he's going side by side. And the problem is that didn't happen. The church has even backpedaled on that and said, nope. What's happened is he used these rocks or seer stones and he put them in a hat and put his face in the hat and translated, and most time did it from a different room than the person who was transcribing. So again, another hidden practice from us. We're told that he did it directly from the plates, and that the majority of the Book of Mormon was translated, as they say, from this hat. And the reality is that Joseph Smith, his own mother had said that he could recite great stories of ancient people and their housing and their wars and their clothing and their religion and everything. And she said that she could do this for hours on end without pausing. He was that good. And so he actually read those books, he memorized things, and he recited those for the Book of Mormon. So the Book of Mormon itself is a complete fraud. It's a sham. There's no reality to it at all. He took those two books and then he put in his own parts from Isaiah that he stole from the Bible, and then just a few little things here and there to make it look like something. We also know that there's been over 1,000 corrections to the Book of Mormon since its release, and a lot of them are big. Like they used to, Joseph Smith believed to begin with, he saw an angel, not God and Jesus Christ together, but he saw an angel. And that was the same way for years and years, even after his death. And it had been changed to say that it was God and Jesus Christ who appeared to him. So that's, just one example of the things that had changed in there. And then we get on to things about race and sexism in the church, and it's just horrible, horrible, horrible. So the LDS Church will claim they don't have a racist history or anything like that, except for the fact that the woman that they paraded around to be this black woman who walked on her feet and they bled, she walked so far trying to, hear the gospel, Jane Manning. Well, it turns out that she was told by Brigham Young that she would never be able to do her own temple covenants. And it wasn't until like the end of the 1800s, almost into the 1900s, that work could be done. And then it had to be done by a white man. And she would only receive blessings to be a servant in the celestial kingdom. She could never be a real person, per se, on the same level as everyone else. And, of course, we have the priesthood ban that went until 1978. And we know that Boyd K. Packer was staunch in not wanting black people to have the priesthood. And that he was one of the people that was definitely making it so it wasn't unanimous. We know that prophets of the time, Spencer W. Kimball, was racist, and that his daughter had said that no Negro will ever receive the priesthood as long as my daddy is president. So you have things like that. And it wasn't until the 1978 that the ban ended, and that was because Jimmy Carter came out actually and said, hey, if you are going to keep up these racist forms of your religion, we're not going to allow anybody that is a member of your church to be part of our administration. And so it's amazing that how quickly the revelation changed and blacks could now have the priesthood. When you look at something that could be somewhat financial or helpful for the church, or put the church in a really bad light, then it was a revelation that happened. You have racist comments from other prophets and apostles all the way up until 1995. There were many things about how they didn't want blacks and whites, interracial marriages. That was said by multiple prophets and apostles after the 1978 ban. And then you get into the fact that there's sexism in the church, and it still exists, and there's this control with it. And it wasn't until the early 2000s, I think it's 2008, I'm not 100% on that, but that a woman actually said prayer in General Conference, which was crazy. And there's still a lot of things that people are looking at with the church to where women are less than than men, and it's absolutely true. It's like a boys' club, and it's a paid boys' club. As long as you are making a lot of money and you're paying a lot in tithing, you get to be a part of that club. You get to have high callings and have people look at you with favor. And so that's something that really bothers me. Another big thing is that the church does not, and I keep saying the church, it's a mindset for me. This is still like just a month out from being a member of the church. And so I gotta change how I say that and say the LDS church or the Mormon church. Use those terms instead. But another thing that really gets me is the fact that all this time when I was paying tithing, I really assumed that my tithing was going to pay the bills, basically. It's going to pay the utilities, to open up new church buildings and things of that nature. Reality is, it wasn't. The church has over $100 billion in assets that they're saving for a rainy day. If you ask me, during the last year and a half of COVID, that probably would have been a time for a rainy day when people don't have jobs. That probably would have been a time where they would say, you know what, let's hold up on tithing. We have $100 billion sitting over here. Let's use something for good with this money. And they didn't. They continued to hide that money, to invest it. They started Ensign Peak. They have these big buildings, skyscrapers where they house other buildings. They have insurance companies they've bought. They're investing stock in the WWE and GameStop. They're doing all these things with this money instead of helping people with it. And like I said, this last year and a half certainly was a rainy day for most people, and they could have used that as a lot of people were out of a job, and yet they were still expected to pay their tithing and do other things. It was Russell M. Nelson who went over to the people in Africa and told them they need to pay their tithing, and that because they hadn't paid their tithing, they weren't receiving blessings, and that was the problem. So Russell M. Nelson, who is, wearing this super nice expensive suit, flying over here in a plane, is telling them that they are not good enough because they're not paying what they have in tithing, even though they don't have any money. And that gets to a bigger point of the fact that there's always this brag from the church that we have no lay clergy. We do not pay anyone in our church. And then Dieter F. Uchtdorf actually had a talk where he talked about this, and he had to say local in his talk because he knew it would be a lie if he said otherwise. So the church uses members to clean and do maintenance on the buildings, to serve and do all these things for disaster relief and so forth. Even though they're sitting on hundreds of billions of dollars, they will not pay for the small things like maintenance and janitorial services. Anyways, so all the members of the 70, all the general authorities, the Quorum of the 12, and the First Presidency get paid a salary. They call it a modest stipend, which is a lie, because it's $120,000 a year. And I don't know how many people would say that $120,000 a year is modest without working for it. That money comes directly out of tithing. And for any of them to receive that money, in addition to, they get reimbursed for things like cell phone plans. They have a living allowance for their houses. They get to buy gifts for people for Mother's Day, Father's Day, Christmas. They'll get reimbursed for it. So all this, so it's like free and clear money on top of all that stuff they're getting reimbursed for. And these are people who paid their way into those positions, because remember, you can't get a high calling unless you're paying so much in tithing, so that they get rewarded then by making this money for free. And we're talking about a lot of people here. It's not a small number when you're talking about all the quorums of the 70, the quorum of the 12, and the First Presidency. They all make six-figure incomes, which is absolutely insane. So why people are struggling to pay their tithing, make ends meet, and they're out there preaching about, well, all you have to do is pay your tithing, even though they're sitting scot-free and not paying tithing on the money that they received because they don't have to, because it's a stipend. And you have people like Dieter F. Uchtdorf, who was giving money every single week to Joe Biden during the presidential election, out of the money that he was receiving from tithe payers. So while somebody probably didn't buy their medicine, couldn't pay a bill, didn't have the food they needed, here's Dieter F. Uchtdorf handing out money to a political campaign. That is from tithing itself. So it's really hypocritical. These are just some of the things that I've found in the church. But there's so much. If you go into church history, it's insane how gross and disgusting the LDS church is. I wish I would have taken the time to write out everything that I have found and I have learned. There really is so much that you probably could sit and talk for 3 or 4 hours about the LDS church is not even on sandy foundation. It is really like quicksand, and it has sunk down into the quicksand. It's being swallowed up into the earth. That's the foundation that the LDS church is on. The whole church was formed on a lie. Joseph even tried to join another church before he created the LDS church, just 2 years before. So 8 years after he had supposedly had the first vision, which, by the way, didn't get recorded until 15 years after it happened in the first place. So if that doesn't tell you something, he tried to join another church, and they said they didn't want him because he was a treasure seeker. He was digging for treasure, and they said that he had to come up in front of the church and denounce that stuff and ask forgiveness, and then they would take him in as a member of the church, and he wouldn't do it. And then you have the things where Joseph Smith was secretly being married to all these women, some of them very, very young. Some of them were maids in his house. He was being married to other men's wives. All these things happened in Nauvoo while he claimed that there was no polygamy for years, didn't say anything to anyone, didn't let Emma in on it. And then you have section 132 where basically Emma finds out, and he's like, oh, well, if you don't agree with me, then you're going to be damned to hell. So you're going to be destroyed if you do not agree with me and allow me to have these women as my wife. And so Emma actually, just to make a point, said, well, I want to take this guy to be my husband if you are going to do that. And just said, no, you can't. You're not allowed to do that. And in fact, Joseph Smith then tried to marry that guy's wife just because of that. And both of them, who happened to be one of his counselors, the guy happened to be one of his counselors at the time, they didn't want anything to do with the church. They were like, no, you're not going to, he's like, you're not marrying my wife. My wife doesn't want to marry you. And they were excommunicated for that. You have the stories of Joseph Smith, who directly tried to have the governor of Missouri killed. There's actual written evidence of this, and people that he tried to hire. His bodyguard at the time, he actually did have him go, and he shot him 3 times, and it didn't kill him. And that's part of the reason why they were in jail in Carthage, as it was. So you also find that Joseph did a lot of shady things with money, and so he would borrow money from people, and when those people needed the money back, it was magically time to move cities. Now we have to go somewhere else. The saints, God said to go somewhere else because that's where we're going to flourish. And the reality is Joseph was running from his own problems the entire time. So it just gets really, really murky in the water, and you realize at some point that the entire church is a lie, is a sham, It was made up by Joseph Smith, and it was done for gain, personal gain. During this time, you have the Jehovah's Witness and the Seventh-day Adventists and a whole host of religions who had come into the light. They were created during this time period that Joseph created the LDS Church. And you had everyone, all those different sects that were, churches that were popping up. They were saying they had visions and they had talked to God and all these things. And so you realize that Joseph was just doing what he saw other people doing, and he was trying to profit off of it and to make his own gain. And he was a really, really horrible egomaniac, and people had testified to that. And so many people that were close to him left the church because of him personally and things they'd seen him do, things they'd heard he'd done, and just said that he would, treat people badly that were close to him. And I just I can't put all this back into a box. It doesn't work that way for me. I tried for so long to be a good member of the church. I did, and I wanted it. And it was bad because I felt like a horrible human being, like I was never good enough. I never could provide a CEO income for my family. And because of that, that means I wasn't righteous enough. That's why I wasn't being blessed to do that. Because of problems in my past with having my son out of wedlock and so forth, I always felt like I had been a disappointment to everyone. And what's been great is as I've left the LDS Church and I've explored other religion and Christianity in general, I 100% am a Christian. I have a belief in Christ. And we've gone to another church, and it's amazing the doctrine that they teach about love and acceptance and of grace and of mercy. And you realize after you leave this cult mindset of the LDS Church that God loves you. He loves you whether you're gay, straight, trans. He loves you whether you're black, white, Puerto Rican, Asian. He loves you whether you're poor, you're middle class, you're super rich. None of those things matter to God. He loves you for who you are, and he will always love you. And his grace is actually good enough. It really is. So instead of me worrying about, like, I'm not going to make it to the highest degree of heaven, the celestial kingdom, because of my past sins and misdeeds and me not providing that CEO income for my family, I don't have to worry about that stuff anymore. I left that church, all of that guilt just melted away. I realized that I am good enough for my Father in heaven. I really am. He loves me. God loves me. And he loves me as I am. I don't have to change to be someone else. And that's the most refreshing thing in the world, to know that you have that unconditional love and that nothing you say or do is going to change that. That your faith in him is enough. And so that's been a huge blessing to me and to my mindset, and to see even some relationships with my children flourish, because I haven't had this focus on what the LDS Church says, but it's on like what we feel because of God, because of our Savior. That's what matters. So in the end, I just wanted to put this out there and let everybody know why I left the church and what the church, the LDS Church, is doing in their practices and their deceitfulness and how they have this mind control over people. They tell you, like, you're going to lose your priesthood, you're going to lose your temple blessings if you leave the church. And it's all control. And it's great to be out from under that control. I'm living life. I'm reading the Bible in a new light like I've never read it before. And I just, I'm not out here to encourage anyone to disbelieve or believe something different than what they do. But if you have questions, if you have doubts, research and make your own choice. That's what I did, and I'm grateful that I did. I'm just sad that I waited this long of my life to do it, because now I feel like I truly have that love and that testimony of my Savior that was not where it should have been before. I always was guilt-ridden, and now I feel confident in who I am and who I can be and where I'm heading in my life. And that's my story, and that's all I have. Thanks.